And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our platform today where we are steadily advancing the cause of constitutional conservatism, waking up the citizens of Louisiana, and measure by measure draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom. Thank you, everybody, for choosing to spend part of your day with us today. It just means so much to us, and we're so grateful to have you as supporters, as listeners, as friends. Today, we will begin our endorsement series with Hollis Day, who's a candidate for state rep in District 66. But before we get to that, let's get on to the scripture of the day. It is Psalm 48, verses 9 through 14, and it says, Lord, as we worship you in your temple, we recall over and over your kindness and your unending love. The fame of your name echoes throughout the entire world, accompanied with praises. Your right hand is full of victory, so let the people of Zion rejoice with gladness. Let the daughters of praise leap for joy, for God will see to it that you are judged fairly. Circle Zion, count her towers, consider her walls, climb her palaces, and then go and tell the coming generation of the care and compassion of our God. Yes, this is our God, our great God forever. He will lead us onward until the end, through all time, beyond death, and into eternity. And I just love that. I think it's such an encouragement to remind ourselves of the goodness and the faithfulness of the Lord. He never loses and he never fails. He always wins and he is always just. So if we purpose our focus to be on the Lord, our worship strengthens us and causes us to live in joyful confidence and trust that he will lead us everywhere we need to go. We have nothing to fear.
Your right hand is filled with victory, and he will lead us onward. I love that. And so, our focus today, as every day, is on the Lord, on his graciousness, and on the victory that is in his right hand as he leads us onward. And speaking of moving forward, moving onward to victory, we're so blessed today to have Hollis Day with us, who, as you said, Danielle, is a candidate for House District 66. Looking forward to talking with him about a number of issues today. Welcome aboard, Hollis. It's great to have you on.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Danielle. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome. We're so thrilled to have you.
We're absolutely thrilled. Hollis, let's start this morning. For those who don't know about you, tell our listeners a little bit about your background, your professional background, your personal background, and why you made this critical decision to run for public office.
Yeah, Chris, just kind of starting back. Went to high school here in Baton Rouge, went to Louisiana Tech, beautiful North Louisiana, Chris, where I know you're from. You love it up there. And coached baseball and football for a couple years out of college. And after that, was in the nursing home business, was in pharmaceutical sales, and basically got in the financial services industry because of the '07, '08 crash, trying to help my dad. And so I have a talk radio show in Baton Rouge called Sage Money Radio. It's been on a little bit over 11 years, which I'm in a pause right now, Chris, because once I became an official candidate, the Equal Airtime Act of 1934, I have to bow out of the radio until the election is over with. Yeah, consider myself a financial strategist. I am not a certified financial planner. I don't deal with stocks or anything like that. I just do some incomes on strategy and taxes. And I love studying the tax code. It's one of those things, if at 47 years old, knowing what I'm doing now, what I like to do, I would go back and be a tax attorney. A little too late for that, but that's where I'm at now. And so I bowed out, do that, of course, still meeting with clients, still getting new business, while also trying to run the campaign.
And what was it, Hollis, as you look at the state, look at the country, what was it that you saw? What was the experience that you had that finally made you say, I've got to stand up, got to fight, I got to run for office, I've got to make a difference? What was it?
Well, circling back to what y'all said on that Bible verse, and Danielle said something about fear, and this is not tough guy talk, Chris, but I don't fear anything. And this hit me about 2 years ago. I have a son named Rustin, actually after the town. He's in Bavaria, Germany. He's in the Army. He enlisted right out of high school. And so it was like his junior year. And, he was like, hey, I want to go in the Air Force, the Navy. He was kind of bouncing around. He knew he was going to the military right out of high school. So one day I said, Russ, it was just he and I in the truck. And I said, Rustin, do you worry about maybe, jumping out of an airplane and your parachute not opening or landing in enemy territory? And he goes, Dad, is in like me dying? And I said, yeah, Rustin, that's my point. He goes, Dad, if I die, I'm going to immediately be with Jesus. What's better than that? And Chris, when he said that, man, I'm like driving. I like look to my left because like I'm turning. I'm like, man, this junior in high school just bowed up to me and said he's not afraid to die. I'm telling you, that was a profound moment in my life about fear because we talk about fear, and of course, the leftist media, the current mainstream media, Chris, is really just a platform for the leftists, the Democrats, and so 90% of it, and so
Probably more than 90%.
yeah, probably so. The motivation for me to run was the lockdown shutdown. I mean, it's still baffling to me today that we let a government tell us we couldn't go to church. We can go play video poker. You can't go to the gym. And I was sitting on my back porch and I was like, wait, didn't we just have an election? Didn't I hear about this Republican majority House, super majority Senate? What in the world is going on? Chris, that got me digging. I mean, I've always voted, and I've been the guy that my friends like literally text me the morning of, hey, who do I vote for? Do I vote yes or no on these amendments? I mean, I've been that guy for a lot of friends, and I never tell them who I vote for. I'm like, I never tell them what to do. I'm like, call me and I'll tell you who I'm voting for and why. And that motivated me, just digging, doing some digging. And once I found out our current state rep was going to go on to not run, that motivated me. And Chris, and just another side story of that, I went to Ruston in June of 20. And me and one of my friends, we're driving up there and I'm griping the whole time about the lockdowns, the shutdowns, just, everything we're in. These gutless, cowardly men that are supposed to be conservative, they're not. They can't spell conservative. The leaders in the House and the Senate, and I'm mad. I mean, talking about it right now, I'm mad. And Chris, I'm like, man, there's this guy named Alan Seaball that has bowed up, and he is like, I'm following him on Facebook, social media. I'm like, he is the only one that is bowing up to this draconian little short man governor that we have. He's the only one. Chris, we talk about this for 2 hours, and my buddy Brennan's like, look, man, you just need to go ahead and run. If you get elected, you'd be great. Chris, we walk into the Louisiana Tech baseball stadium, and my friend and I go sit down. There's 4 empty seats next to us, okay? Game starts. Well, within the first inning, these 4 men come and sit down they come and sit down the row, and I don't pay much attention. Well, me and this gentleman, he's sitting next to me, Chris. Our shoulders are touching, right? It's a baseball stadium. It's very small. And he answers his phone, and he's like, yeah, okay. Well, look, I didn't get elected to let that happen. Look, I'm at this baseball game. Let me call you back. So he puts his phone in his pocket. I look at him, Chris. Who is it? It's Alan Seaball. I'm sitting next to Alan.
Wow.
What a divine appointment. You can't make that up.
No, because look, like if you think about it, if me and my friend swap seats, then he's sitting next to Alan. The conversation never takes place.
Right.
So I elbow him, and we start talking. And I feel like Alan pretty much gave me a litmus test that night of views. And so we talked, told him I was going to run if the current rep was not going to run. And he kind of verified that already. And we go up, me and my friend go up to take a tour of the clubhouse in the 7th inning stretch. And I said, Brennan, man, like, don't you think that's confirmation from the Lord for me to run? He goes, crystal clear. So we come back and watch the rest of the game. And one of the guys sitting next to Alan, he goes, Hollis, I heard y'all's conversation. Alan just told me, he goes, I hope you realize that's providential. I mean, you think about all these seats. And I said, I agree. Of course, we had a great conversation. We shook hands, exchanged phone numbers. Well, the next night, this was a baseball regional. So there was a game the next day. We sat next to each other again. And he actually introduced me to Raymond Cruz and Chuck Owen that night, 2 fellow Patriots as well.
Absolutely.
He
Love
introduced
those
me to
guys.
those guys that night. And so, just had, basically 2 days of talking to Alan. And again, that's just, at my age, Chris, at 47 years old, I don't believe in coincidences. And that was not a coincidence. If you think of all the seats in that stadium, and I'm talking about him for 2 hours on the way up there, I mean, deal done.
That is absolutely providential. There's no question about it. One of those signs that comes along that just affirms the decision that you've made. Back up for just a second here. I'm so struck by the story about Rustin within the context of fear. So often, Hollis, many people who want to do things in life, maybe many people who want to do what you're doing, they don't do it because of fear of reprisal, fear of criticism, fear of failure, all kinds of fear. And for you to have a son who would make such a simple but profound statement to you in response to your question is a testament not only to his character, but a testament to the kind of person that you are. So I wanted to make sure that I noted that. Secondly, I'm gathering from what you're saying that the primary reason why you decided to run for this office is that you're sitting there and you're saying, what is going on? How does our government have the power and the right to slice up our individual liberty and freedom this way, to lock us down, to mask us up, to coerce us into getting these vaccines, destroying businesses across the state? It sounds to me like really your decision to run is a reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot around that too. I think we have a massive overreach of the federal government, and even in the state, flex its muscles during shutdown. But again, it baffles me, going back to, okay, look, if this restaurant, the owner is willing to open up and he's willing to staff it with a cook and servers, and I'm willing to take my family. I mean, Chris, as adults, we should take our own risk assessment to do anything. It's one of those things like, hey, when my daughter's driving, hey, Katie, baby, why don't you wait a little bit? I have a daughter named Katie and Molly. Katie, baby, why don't you wait a little bit? It's raining really hard right now. Why don't you wait? Let's just see if the rain slows up a little bit, then you can leave, right? That's a risk assessment for me and my daughter to make between ourselves. Chris, I have, going back to the shots, I have 7 doctor friends, close physicians. I had 7 one-on-one conversations with these physicians. 6 of the 7 said, Bubby, you don't need the shot. You're healthy, you're fit. You have no comorbidities. Going back to the shutdowns, like, who is the government? And again, Chris, where was our conservative majority House?
Exactly.
Where were they, Chris?
I'll tell you this. There was a certain representative whom you mentioned earlier, Alan Seabaugh, who was circulating a petition in the legislature, and he needed a simple majority in the state legislature in order to revoke the governor's emergency lockdown. And even though we have a 2/3 majority, was unable to secure enough Republican signatures to get that done. So maybe that goes a certain way in answering your question about where they were.
Yeah, exactly. So, Chris, it goes back to, why didn't they sign it? Fear. Fear of what? Maybe retaliation from the governor. I doubt retaliation from the constituents, because me and my circle of friends were like, what is going on? Chris, another story too is there's several Louisiana schools that play their sports in the Mississippi Association of Independent Schools, the MAIS. Okay, like there's a school in Amite, several schools in North Louisiana, school in Bogalusa, Franklinton. These schools are in Louisiana, obviously, but they play their sports in the Mississippi Association of Independent Schools. So during this time, Chris, these schools were playing football. Obviously, they could not play football in Louisiana, but Mississippi was allowing football. And I remember thinking, like, what? Does the virus stop at the state line or something? How are these?
It must.
Exactly.
Who is this tyrant governor to tell us we can't do what we want to do? But really, I was mad at him. But I go back to, wait, where are all these conservatives? And Chris, it goes back to Danielle. When you agree that basically all conservatives pretty much are Republicans, but not all Republicans are conservative. And that we have the textbook of that happening right now in Louisiana.
Yeah, we do. And we've been hearing a lot of rumors that there's a new COVID variant that's going to be rearing its head, quote unquote, right? And that this fall, September, October, the feds are looking at masking us if we want to fly. And, there's already talk on mainstream media about, go and get your booster and all this nonsense. What is your position on that? I mean, I get your position, but what would you say to that? And what would you do once in office if you see that the feds are trying to mask us and are pressuring the state to lock us down again?
Yeah, well, Daniel, I'm really into health and fitness. I do a lot of things differently, probably than 99% of the people do with food and exercise. And so, look, if a person wants to take a COVID shot every day, they can. That's their right. If a person doesn't want to take one, that's their right as well. So I stand on the medical freedom platform for sure. As a citizen, and I mean, I'm just not going to wear a mask. I wore one probably less than 5 times the last time, because I just kind of got forced. One time I know I was going into Walgreens and I was trying to get my kid a prescription, and I walked in without it and just kind of got hollered at, and it was just like, you know what, just let me go put this on. I will never put one on again. I mean, I'm just not going to do business. I'm not going to go to businesses that do that. As a newly appointed or newly elected legislator, I would try to influence my colleagues to snap into reality and look. But Danielle, if this happens post-election, we're going to have a new governor, and he's going to be a Republican. And I think Louisiana would take a different stance on that. And look, and that's the thing, right? We still see people wearing my daughter and I were driving yesterday. This person was walking on a sidewalk with nobody in the close vicinity of him, and he had a mask on by himself. I'm like, but look, I said, look, Katie, look at that person. Well, it is, but it's like, look, he can he can put 10 on around his head if he wants to. That's America. He's not hurting me.
Exactly.
He's not hurting, that's what he wants to do. That's fine. But I'm going to resist big time as a citizen and as the state representative for District 66.
Well, that's great to hear.
That is great to hear. And let me ask you this. Let's say you're in a situation as a legislator and you believe in something and you've tried to work with other representatives, which no question you will be able to do because you have that ability. But if there is something that you believe in very, very deeply, very fundamentally, that touches on individual sovereignty, individual freedom, maybe a situation where you feel like the government is stepping beyond its constitutional authority, what is your commitment, or what do you tell our listeners and potential voters in your district? Can we count on Hollis Day to stand up, to protect us, to represent us, even if he's standing alone?
Yeah, Chris, when I used to be in management, I used to manage, a couple hundred employees, and I was real big in kind of the team building, and, every person has a different personality. So for the people that were directly underneath me, I would want to know their personality and, what motivates them, how to talk to them. So I love these personalities tests. And I've done, there's several different brands of these things. And the one thing for me that is the number one trait for Hollis Day is I'm loyal, dependable. You can count on me. And I'm running on freedom and liberty. And that sounds so cliche because, like, when I think of freedom and liberty, I think of 1776. But my gosh, we got a dose of it, back a couple of years ago. And so, yeah, we have an overreaching federal government, overreaching state government, and best case scenario or worst case scenario, we don't grow government anymore. And we're seeing government growing right now from a state and a federal level. But Chris, my business got flipped on its head during the shutdown, as some of my friends' businesses did as well. How many state employees or federal employees missed a paycheck during that time?
Great question.
None, zero. So, for years, so during this, Chris, while I was in my closet in my house doing my radio show, the studio, bought me this nice fancy microphone because I couldn't go to the booth. And I'm furious because, my producer is like, hey, do you have a closet with clothes, for insulation or whatever? I'm like, so look, for a couple months, I'm doing my show with my laptop. I'm like, and look, I just get mad talking about it. I got mad doing it.
I know, it's so miserable.
Yeah. And it's like, the government's too big. But Chris, during this time, I am belting on the overreaching government. I am belting on these lazy federal workers. Not all, some in DC. So going back to Chris, whenever we talk about cutting budgets and stuff, I've been in a situation probably like most Americans have where I've lost a job. I'm like, okay, guys, we gotta, I look at my bills. Okay, I gotta save $1,200 a month. What's going out? Well, Chris, we can't cut the electric bill, right? We can't cut the water bill. What are these luxuries that I have right now that are going to end? Chris, why don't we do that with state government? Like, why is the answer never cutting state government? Why is that? It baffles me.
To the contrary, there were a majority of legislators who voted not only not to cut back, but to actually explode the statutory spending cap in the final hours of the 2023 legislative session. What are your thoughts on that?
That right there showed the true cowards, Chris. I mean, I think they needed 36 votes, and it sorted out they actually had 41. So all you need was 36. Well, we knew the governor's a skilled politician. And so we knew he was going to come in and start, promises buying these people. 41 went to 19. I want these these people to answer is, why did you vote for it the week before or whatever, but the next week you voted to bust the cap?
What happened during that week? Great question. What happened in the interim during that 1 week? That's such a great point.
Yeah, and look, in District 66 is a very conservative. District 66 is one of the most conservative districts in the state. And I would think most people in this district would want their representative to stand strong and not cower down, to not vote on it 1 week and then change the vote the next week because, whatever promises were made. And I just, again, going back to fear, I'm just not scared, and I'm very fiscally responsible. And, to me, those 19 were brave and they did the right thing. And I think I think most constituents would agree that they did the right thing too. But, it didn't happen because, Chris, there's no leadership. And that was my screaming voice the last couple of years on my radio show is, where is the leadership coming from both chambers? Like, where are these guys? You were supposed to be conservatives. Where are you? Step up. Chris, with a majority House, supermajority Senate of Republicans and a Democrat governor, he should be coming to us.
Well, exactly. And Hollis, just to your point earlier on loyalty, I mean, what this budget spending cap busting showed us was that we have some state legislators who are more loyal to the powers that be, who are more loyal to maybe their own self-interest than they are to their constituents. And at the end of the day, they are sent there to represent their constituents. They're not there for their colleagues. They're not there for a title. They should be there to represent their constituents. So, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And maybe just to bring it home to your constituents, could you tell us a little bit about what's at stake in your district for the future, the next couple of years? What do you see being at stake that you would be fighting for in Baton Rouge?
Yep. And Danielle, I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to circle back to what you just said, if you don't mind. Danielle, I think some of these Republicans who say they're conservative, they know a Republican governor's coming next, and it may be the one they don't want. I think it was intentional. I think some of these people voted to bust a spending cap because it's going to start the next governor, whoever it is. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a Republican. It's going to start him or her in a bind in office. So I think that was intentional as well. And as far as the main things for my district, crime's a big issue here. School choice is a major issue here, and I'm talking about that. And probably, I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm gonna go ahead and say probably 80%. And this is just a wild guess. 80% of the people in my district, their kids go to private school, and so school choice is a big deal. And Ohio just passed it, and I've read that. I've read their bill, and I've read Arizona's, and I think we could probably pull something from both of those to make Louisiana's, to make it specific for us. We need major tort reform. In fact, my 11th grade daughter just got her license, and we had to get another vehicle. Chris, Danielle, I am paying, thank goodness Rustin's in Germany because he's considered a non-op driver right now. But for me and 4 kids, I'm paying $1,315.02 a month for car insurance. $1,315.02 for insurance. I just talked to my friend in Mississippi. He's paying for 4 vehicles. Now it's him and his wife and his 2 kids, and they're both in college. He said, Bubby, I'm paying less than $500. So tort reform is a major issue here. And, I don't have the exact answer. I know some big decisions have to be made though, because we have to fix this, man. Like it's getting out of control. It's out of control. And mainly too, I've just been talking a lot about establishment Republicans, establishment politicians. You mostly hear that and you think of DC, Washington, DC. And I think, y'all, I pray for our state and our country every morning, but I almost feel like DC's gone. So now the states have a responsibility. We can be sovereign and protect ourselves from DC. Because look, there is no DC without 50 states. And I think these people in DC, and even maybe some of the longtime people in Baton Rouge, they're just out of touch with reality. And so, keeping establishment politicians out of office, because I'm not establishment. I'm coming as definitely an outsider, conservative fighter. And I would love to get rid of the state income tax. If you look at a map and you see the southern states, we're one of the only few southern states that has a state income tax. We're one of the only southern states that does not have constitutional carry. Chris, I wrote an article not long ago, Danielle, Louisiana's ranked 5th in outward migration behind California, New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts. What do us 5 states have in common, or at least with those 4 states? High taxes, crime. I mean, what do we do?
Yeah. As an issue, Hollis, it's so interesting as you're going down the list of priority issues. Each one in my mind, I'm checking, saying, yep, killed by a rhino. Yep, killed by a rhino. Yep, killed by a rhino. Because it's true, these fundamentally important issues that conservatives are trying to advance in the legislature, more often than not, are sabotaged, undermined, and ultimately killed, not by Democrats, but by rhino Republicans. And that's the very reason why LCAG was formed, because Katie and I and others went down to the legislature thinking we're going to go down here and watch supermajority Republicans take care of the people's business in a very effective way. Well, needless to say, and you know the story, that was just the opposite of what we saw. Another great point that you make is that DC is effectively gone. So what does that leave? That leaves the Ninth and the 10th Amendments of the United States Constitution that specifically provide that the state governments, the state legislatures shall be bulwarks against federal tyranny and federal overreach. And that is exactly the role that our legislature should be playing. And it sounds to me like you're suggesting both the federal government's collapsing and our state governments are not doing the job they need to do to protect us.
Absolutely. And just talking about limiting government, Chris, limiting government. I mean, I'm just not in favor of this, of government growing. And every time, more of a federal issue, sending money to Ukraine like we are is insanity. But as far as, a local issue, again, busting the spending cap, people don't realize that grew government. That grew government when you decide not to pay off debt and to bring on more. That is growing. It's growing government. And I want to shrink it, make it smaller if possible, and let the private sector do its job. Most people don't work for the state or don't have government jobs. And so we now look, we need those folks for sure. It's just like Rustin was, during boot camp, Rustin was telling me that, some of these people, he's like, Dad, in boot camp, there's some people who this is their first time ever holding a gun. I was like, well, Rustin, obviously, we don't want those folks in the battlefield with us, in a foxhole with you, but maybe they'll push some paper and whatever in the Army. And we need folks like that. We need state workers. We need federal employees. We definitely do. But it's like we're growing them at a level where it's like we don't want every person to depend on the government. And so I'm in favor of, like I said, best case scenario, shrinking government, worst case scenario, just not letting it grow anymore.
Well said. Very well said.
And Hollis, I was having a conversation this past weekend with a candidate for local office, and he asked me this question: what would be a more successful legislator for you? Would it be someone who passed 9 bills and brought home $3 million, or someone who passed 18 bills and brought home $300 million? And I said, well, at the end of the day, it really does depend on what were the bills and did the money undercut the rest of the state? Because it's not just about bringing bacon home for the district. It's about, okay, we need money for projects at home. And I do believe personally that money should probably, a lot less of it needs to go to Baton Rouge so it can come back to home. But that's a separate issue. But my whole point was there are going to be trade-offs to be made. And to say that legislators who bring less money home have been unsuccessful, I think, we need to take a long, hard look at people who are saying that.
Yeah, Calvin Coolidge, I know it was Calvin Coolidge. I don't know what year it was when he said it, but he said it's more important to kill bad bills than to bring on new ones. And that's kind of my mindset. Although, or let me say this, however, I have said this, when I get in, I want to be part of the legislature. My gosh, I want to break records for passing conservative legislation, and I want to cram them down the throats of the people who weren't conservative, who we had to sit back and watch the last couple of years not do anything. So there's going to be some conservative legislation passed, and I am ready. I am ready to stand up there, and I'm not going to cower down to the people who want to grow government. I'm not going to cower down to them.
Let me ask you this, just to drill down a little bit on one of the issues that you mentioned a minute ago, which is school choice. I was going through my mind, and I'm just thinking several items of legislation over the past 2 or 3 years involving enhancing school choice, parents' ability to make decisions about where their kids go to school, to get them out of these failing schools, just to make it more flexible for them. And Rhino Republicans have repeatedly killed that legislation. It sounds to me like school choice is an issue that you will focus on from day one.
It is, Chris, because like a lot of people in this district, we're paying taxes, and I look at, again, it's a choice, right? I choose, and fortunately, I can send my kids to a private school. Okay, not everybody can, and I think everybody should. Chris, when you look at the schools, and again, we haven't even touched on the culture issues. Because I'm really, when I sat down a couple of years ago and told one of my friends, Scott McKay, I said, Scott, I'm going to run, and I'm going to run on the anti. It's like my platform is going to be anti-woke. He goes, that'd be a good one. And little did I know, it's even become more. I'm not even sure 2 years ago people really weren't tuned in for me to the word woke. Now it's on every news segment, the word's mentioned. And Chris, what is being taught in fact, I got a text message yesterday from a friend of mine. His son is at BRCC. He got asked from a professor about pronouns. It's like, dude, just teach your class. No one's even worried about that here. But that's again, going back to the public schools and school choice. Parents don't want their kids being taught that. They want their kids being, the old-fashioned words, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what they want. And now we have these woke people, going in and spreading their agenda to kids and to students, and especially higher education. Again, I know school choice, we're talking about, high school and stuff, but middle school, elementary school, but somehow, and Chris, Danielle, I think Louisiana probably is a little more insulated than some states as far as having a lot of liberal teachers, but we do have our fair share here in high schools.
We do, and it is. And let me say this: it is permeating this critical race theory, this transgender theory, all of these radical sexual and gender and racial concepts are being injected into public schools throughout the country. And the wolves are circling the door in Louisiana. There's no question about it. And we have to be prepared for it. One of the excuses, Hollis, once you're a legislator, that you will hear very often, when good legislation, common sense legislation about our education system, about prohibiting these concepts from being taught in public schools in Louisiana, legislation to prohibit that, when it's put forward, one of the common opposition phrases you're going to hear is, but this is not really a problem in Louisiana now. This is not something that we need to focus on. So what are you doing? This is a solution in search of a problem. And my response to that has always been, the purpose of good legislation is often preemptive. We see what's happening around the country, and we want to make a statement now as a matter of policy in Louisiana. That is not coming here, so don't even try. What is your response to that?
Well, again, that just shows a level of cowardice and having no backbone, because that's the phrase that they use. You have an answer to a problem that doesn't exist. Well, look what California and New York are probably, 7-8 years ahead of us. I don't want to become them. And so if we can see how their states, again, outward migration, why are people leaving those states? Why? Because they're tired of the government interfering in their lives. And so, yeah, we can look at those states and see what we don't want to become and try to put forward legislation to stop that before it even gets here. Absolutely.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, I think that response is a default for people who don't have an intelligent opinion on the subject, but that's just me.
And are afraid to act because of the special interest to which they're beholden in the legislature, unfortunately. Hollis, the one issue that I wanted to bring up and discuss with you so that you can address it directly, this administrative action that was filed against you regarding your professional work in response on the heels of much of the very bold public criticism that you've had on your radio show of our government and the way that the government is oppressing the rights of the people. And then this administrative action is filed against you. For the benefit of your voters and our listeners, talk about the background of that and explain that to us.
Well, Chris, in 2020, as our nation grappled with what I call the unprecedented challenges, I consistently voiced my opposition to the insane COVID lockdowns that gripped our nation, our land. I believed and still believe that these mandates and shutdowns were basically an assault on our freedom, nothing short of total insanity. And I made it my mission to speak out against it every week on my radio show because I truly value freedom and understand the importance of just individual liberty. And for that, the Biden administration is going after my business as a retribution with a civil lawsuit aimed at silencing my conservative voice on the radio. Chris, I'm a huge proponent of oil and gas. Okay. I mean, I used to work for an oil and gas company. And so, this whole climate change thing, I think is a hoax. I think I'm getting off chasing a rabbit here, but like the whole climate thing is a goal of globalism, which we haven't discussed here. I'm thinking most listeners are probably tuned into that, but that's a form where the globalists and that's their goal. And that's how they're uniting. So whenever you have and also too, whenever Biden was campaigning, Chris, he was campaigning on the very first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the Trump tax cuts. Well, the Trump tax cuts were very friendly to oil and gas investors. Okay. Well, Biden was saying this like a couple times a week. So I kept like you guys have a radio show. I don't know if you guys have ever played anybody else saying things, but me and my producer compiled Biden. It was like 2 minutes of him just saying the same thing. When I get elected, the first thing I'm going to do is do away with the Trump tax cuts. He said that. So, I loathe Joe Biden. I think he's intentionally destroying this country. And I've said that on my radio show 1,000 times. I'm a lover of oil and gas, and I'm an outspoken Christian. What do those three things get you?
Targeted.
Yeah.
Targeted. Political retribution is what it can get you.
Yeah. And so, going back to, again, in 2020, as the government flagrantly shut down our businesses, deciding who and who is not essential. Chris, everybody who puts food on their table is essential. Everybody. Danielle, do you agree with that? Everybody is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not for the government to tell me who in our society is essential, which they're trying to do in more ways than one, regardless of lockdowns.
Exactly. So, that's why that administration, they questioned me a couple of years ago. And I have a lot of colleagues right now looking at this because the question is, why haven't you questioned any of my friends? So they're all like on pins and needles. And Chris, talking about, standing alone, I have felt the pressure from this big government. And, there was a day where it's just like, man, what do I do? It's like, no, I didn't. I'm going to stand strong and fight. And that's where now, Chris, one of their strategies, though, is to string this thing out for years. And this has been going on over 5 years. Chris, if I was doing something so bad, don't you think they would have shut down my radio show?
Well, it sounds to me like they were allowing you to do whatever it is you supposedly did wrong for 3-4 years. And then when the statute of limitations is fixing to run out, then they decide to file this administrative action against you. So apparently they were so concerned about it, they allowed you to do it year after year after year.
And Hollis, just to jump in, would you just clarify for the listeners what the administrative action is? What is it allegedly for?
So I'm in the financial services business, and I was raising capital for an oil and gas company. And basically they said I should have had a certain license to do that. It's not because anybody lost money or anything like that. This is a civil issue. And they're saying I should have had a certain license. And we're like, well, no, he doesn't deal with stocks. He doesn't do this. And again, they questioned me about it. And it should be one of those things where like, hey, well, Hollis, you should get your license. What took you 35 months to tell me that? I mean, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, government, and give you 3 months, 90 days to decide. But when I got questioned, I never heard another word from them, never heard anything until 35 months later. And again, it was 1 month shy of being statute of limitations, which, by the way, I didn't even know I was on the clock. So yeah, it's basically them trying to, these baseless charges, being a very outspoken critic of the president and knowing that he is, and they even made a comment that this probably wouldn't be happening under the Trump administration. They even said that to me. So, but again, Chris, I was hammering them the whole time, and I had no idea they were listening to me. They probably listen to every radio show, and I've said so many times, these people that are making these rules for us to mandate and can't do this, can't do that, they haven't missed a paycheck. They haven't.
They have not missed a paycheck, and yet the decisions that they make And the policies that they implement are causing great economic hardship to Louisiana citizens and to Americans across the country.
Yeah, and there's a lot of there's a lot of situations right now on TV of this happening, right? I mean, the Catholic, the Biden administration openly admitted to infiltrating Catholic churches in search of, quote, dangerous extremists, calling mothers at school boards meetings, I think terrorists.
Let me drill down on that for just a second, Hollis, because it's a very, very important point you make up. And it was in Virginia, and it was one of the issues that the current governor of Virginia ran on and won on, because it's an absolute fact that the federal government, Department of Homeland Security, put complaining parents who were going to these school board meetings to demand that these radical concepts like critical race theory that teaches students to view one another strictly through the lens of race, strictly through the lens of oppressor or oppressed. They wanted to know whether that was being taught in the schools, and they were protesting against it. Well, do you know what the federal government did, what Joe Biden did? Put those parents on a domestic terrorist list. So when people think about this administrative action against you, they need to think about it within the context of federal tyranny and what our government is capable of doing to those who dare stand up against it. And I'll tell you this, Hollis, it makes me more confident in your candidacy and more confident in your capacity to lead. The fact that you would face an issue like this where you're being sued by the federal government, and yet that doesn't deter you. That doesn't back you up. That doesn't make you say, well, I'm not going to run. I'm going to throw in the towel. No, it makes you double down. It emboldens you even more. And that's precisely the kind of leader we have got to have in this state. Because the theme of the day, I'll tell you right now, is who has the courage and the capacity to stand up against government tyranny. And that's what we're dealing with in this day and age, increasing, suffocating government tyranny. And I think that's why you're the best candidate for this race.
Well, I appreciate it, Chris. Danielle, and it's it's bigger than me. These people that get in there and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. It's way bigger than one person, way bigger. It's our culture, our schools, our churches, our state. I don't think it's all hopeless. Now, I do think we're in the battle for the soul of our nation right now. I think we're knee deep in the battle. And like you guys said earlier on the Bible verse, I say this all the time. Hey, guys, the script's been written. We are on the winning side. The script's been written. Now, I do think as Christians, we're called to stand up and fight, to not cower down and let these woke and establishment politicians just bulldoze us. No, dig your heels in and fight. There's a saying, you have no chance to win. You have zero chance to win unless you fight. And I do think individual freedom is the highest order. We the people are the answer.
That is such a great point, a great way to end the show. Although I do want to give you an opportunity to make a final pitch, Hollis. If you were standing at the door of someone's home, going door to door, I know you'll be doing that later today. What do you tell that voter in 30 seconds? Why should I vote for Hollis Day for House District 66?
Hey, I'm Hollis Day. Nice to meet you. I'm knocking doors today in your neighborhood. Here's my card. Give a push card with all my information. You can see right there the most important things to me. I'm a very conservative person. I'm a Christian, and I want to be part of I want to be part of the legislature that's going to break records for passing conservative legislation. Call me with any questions or ask me if they have any questions. And a lot of times, Chris, that's when you find out what their one issue is. Hey, well, what's your stance on abortion? Well, I believe that life begins at conception, period. No discussion. The Second Amendment, I believe in constitutional carry. So when you ask that question, a lot of times you get their one issue, what's important to them. Now, obviously, I'm targeting conservative voters, right? I'm knocking on the doors of registered Republicans or independents. And so it's been very positive so far. And I'm having fun, man. I love it when I'm kind of pretty good at gauging the vibe, Chris, Danielle, when they open the door, like if they're holding a 3-year-old or 2-year-old and the dog's barking, right, I got 10 seconds. But man, when they come outside and close the door, okay, here we go. I may have a minute or 5 or 10, and I love it. I love engaging in that conversation.
Well, we are so happy that you're in the race. We're so happy that you're running. It is inspiring to us and to people, many people in your districts. I'm sure that you are. And we're going to have you back on before the election so we can talk to you about how things are going. But we're just pleased to have you on. God bless you, and onward we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Chris. And one last quote that I love about John Quincy Adams: "Sacred duty is ours, results are God's."
One of the best. God bless you, Hollis.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Well, Chris, I mean, obviously, this is the endorsement series, right? So it's no secret to us what his perspectives are. But I really, especially in light of all of this COVID discussion that's creeping back on the news, am so thrilled to see how impassioned he is about protecting the liberties of the people of the state.
And we need leaders like Hollis Day. There's no question about it. As I said earlier, the theme of the day, the biggest fear that citizens across Louisiana have is increased government overreach, government tyranny, the manufacturing of emergencies in order to justify further seizure by the government of our liberties. They always start by manufacturing emergencies that create great fear. So what does fear produce? Fear produces a desire for safety, and the government offers, well, this is the solution, this is the safety. Hollis understands that, and I believe is the best candidate to stand up against this increased government tyranny. I do want to say that there are other candidates in the race, and probably very good people, no question about it. I'm sure they're good people, based upon, however, our survey of the land, our survey of the race, and really what we need in the legislature now. We have to have patriots. We have to have warriors. We have to have people who not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I think Hollis has done that, and I think that he can be trusted with our votes, and I believe that he is going to do what he says he's going to do. So that's why I'm very happy on behalf of State of Freedom, Danielle, and on behalf of LeCag to issue a full-throated endorsement of Hollis Day in District 66.
Yes, and anyone who is skeptical and distrustful of the establishment is at least stepping in the right direction. And he is, I believe, running in the right direction, because the administrative state is bearing down on his back, breathing down his neck, and he's still willing to stand up and say everything that government, big government stands for is absolutely wrong. And you get out of my life, get out of my business, and let us live our lives. So that's what we're looking for in candidates. We're looking for people who are strong believers. We're looking for people who want to fight for the children, who want to fight for the children to have a good education that is actual education. We want people who are wanting to work with industry that brings jobs to this economy, to revitalize the state of Louisiana. And I love that he's skeptical of all this climate change stuff, because, Chris, you and I have discussed quite often this whole idea of carbon capture, and that it's a hoax. It's an absolute hoax. At best, it's an unproven tactic, and it doesn't do what the capturers, what the environmentalists say that they want it to do. So to not fall for that and say, you know what, it's going to bring jobs to my district, I really, really appreciate that. To me, that shows integrity, and that shows clear-eyed vision. I don't want to see someone compromising because some hoax is going to bring jobs to their community, because in 5 years, those jobs are not going to exist.
Exactly. Temporary jobs to promote a concept that doesn't work, that has not been proven to achieve its desired objective. And those, as you said, those jobs will not be in existence 5 years from now once they've taken the money and run. The final point I want to make here about Hollis is that when I'm looking to see which candidate will really stand up with backbone and courage for individual freedom in the legislature, and I see someone who is the target of a federal administrative action, a civil action, designed to intimidate him and designed to throttle his voice. And instead of cowering before them, he doubles down, becomes more emboldened, and moves forward with courage. That's my man. That's the man that I want. So I want to encourage our listeners, far from allowing this civil administrative action against Hollis, which I'm sure he's going to be attacked on. They're going to try to make it sound like it's the worst thing under the sun. Think about my words and think about what I'm saying, and think about whether or not you want to have someone like Hollis Day fighting for you in the state legislature. I believe that he is the right man for the job. You know what I mean, Danielle?
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I was just going to share with our listeners that if they would like to support Hollis and candidates like Hollis who are standing up for what's right, standing up on Christian principles, standing up for conservative, true conservative, small government type of issues, they should donate to LeCag, because LeCag is a PAC and we are supporting candidates like Hollis who are doing the right things, who are fighters, and who are going to stand for the people.
Absolutely. The candidates that LeCag endorses and the State of Freedom endorses, we are going to be making donations, and we're going to be using those resources to help them be successful in their race. So your donations to LeCag, subscriptions to LeCag, memberships in LeCag, help us to have the resources that we need to help return our legislature to the people. So please subscribe, please donate, please, whatever resources you have available to put toward LeCag's effort, to put toward the campaigns of people like Hollis Day. We are deeply, deeply appreciative. And as always, Danielle, the State of Freedom and LeCag, from the heart, so thankful for all of our supporters, all of our listeners, as we expand across the great state of Louisiana.
Yes, indeed. And if folks would like to support the show, they can do so at freedomstate.us. And as we mentioned, LeCag, you can support LeCag at lecag.org, lacag.org. And there's also a way to do that through the Freedom State website.
The State of Freedom, Danielle, is expanding across the state of Louisiana, revolutionizing the way political advocacy is done in Louisiana, slowly but surely draining the Louisiana swamp and taking grand steps each day to preserve the state of freedom in Louisiana.
Yes, indeed. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, lacag.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.